Good evening. Yeah, we have quorum so far. We are going to start tonight off with a work session with an update from Jessica Zelag, Deputy Director. She's going to give us a little rundown on the modern zoning code.
I share. All right. Hello, everyone. I am not Tim Keen. I'm Jessica Zelag, Deputy Planning Director, and happy to be in front of you all today. Hello, Esty. It's my first time in front of you as a new commissioner, so good to see you. Presenting an update to implementation of the modern zoning code. A little loud.
Little loud. Yeah, there you go.
How's that?
Greg's got this
Good.
dialed in.
Right here. Hot mic. Okay. We're good. Great. Okay. So let me roll right into this. The beginning of the update is to go over something that I know that you're all familiar with, the overarching goals for the modern zoning code and some of the big shifts that we're making with the new code. As you'll remember from our time together in April, we approached this updated, adopted version of the code with four overarching goals in mind for what we're trying to accomplish with the code. And that was to make sure that we create a variety of housing options for all Boiseans, doing that within our residential zones and what we created as our mixed use zones. Ensuring that we have a development pattern that is less water and energy consumptive. And that's through our incentives that I'll speak a little bit more about. Creating mobility options for Boiseans, and that is in relation to where we thought strategically about where we already have planned public investment along our major transit corridors and how we want to concentrate the density and more residential units along those transit corridor lines, as well as a goal to grow and develop in a way that we can afford to do so. We know that it's costly investment to continue to grow outwards from our boundaries and include services such as sewer, water, fire, libraries, parks, and places where we don't already have those amenities, but instead looking inwardly in the city where we have those variety of community amenities that people come to expect and pay for, and how do we infill and grow within our boundary in a thoughtful and appropriate way. So as I mentioned, we were here in April where the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval for the modern zoning code. We began a little bit earlier than that, and our outreach even precedes this calendar with over 70 public meetings, thousands of comments from citizens, and then our official application, which was submitted in February, approved by Planning and Zoning, and then unanimously affirmed by City Council in June. The code didn't go into effect right away, though it was adopted. We set a future effective date, which is December 1st. So the math is pretty easy on that. We're in November and there are 17 days till the end of the month. So we've been working diligently as staff. The implementation of the code not only includes training of staff and how we'll review new applications as they come in the door post December 1, but also the systems that we use to process our applications. That system's called Acela. Our tools such as the website and operation dashboards and other content that will help explain to the citizens and those who come forward with development applications how they should view the new code and the zoning that applies to them. Our goal to direct development where there's planned public investment, there's a variety of different zoning options that we use to ensure that we have a variety of residential, but also mixed use zones throughout the city, but also ensuring that there's a really strong design, urban design requirement in those areas. And so each of these areas that have a mixed use zone applied to them, so that's our downtown area, our State Street transit corridors, our best in class transit routes, our pathway corridors, and our regional and community activity centers have use-specific standards and design requirements along with them to ensure that urban feel throughout. You're well aware with our downtown zone, but we've expanded that through the MX5 to include additional areas in the Shoreline District and the Lust District. So you'll see that more urban treatment in future projects that come through in those areas that are much like what you would expect in a downtown urban center. Our MX4 is our State Street transit-oriented design zoning, which allows for a greater height and density, and right now is applied to only 4 areas along State Street that coincide with the State Street transportation oriented development plan, the VRT and ADCHD, and partners and ITD have been working on for many years, and really kind of brings to the front not only that urban pedestrian environment, but it will accommodate different kind of flows of traffic pattern in the way that people use transit, and we expect them to think of that corridor as a transit-oriented corridor. Our MX3 district is the zone that really brings that kind of downtown urban design, but spread throughout the city in really thoughtful ways about this aligns with where we've made that planned public investment in our infrastructure and our transit lines. So you'll see MX3 along State Street, as I mentioned, Fairview, Vista, our activity centers, also included with Greenbelt and Federal Way. And along those areas, something to note, and there was hours of discussion about this at Planning and Zoning and at City Council, is the conversion that applies to R1 zones within 1/8 of a mile from the center line of the Best in transit routes, which are Fairview, State Vista, and designate a mixed use. They also designated a mixed use in the Boise Comprehensive Plan. So those R1 zones that meet those criteria have been converted to R2. And the boundary was made by natural and implied lines, so that we weren't breaking up neighborhoods by the alley, but by the street itself. Of that conversion, which there was plenty of conversation about, it's about 1.3% of residential parcels in the city. So not a large number, but it's really important what we're attempting to create there is a more natural transition from those greater in height, little more dense residential mixed use treatments to then the transition to the neighborhood. Also with this conversion and any of these transitions come pretty well vetted transition standards as far as like the setbacks from the MX zones to the residential zones, as long as the height and kind of spacing from what is more of a mixed use commercial residential to the true residential. Our MX1 is something we heard from the community probably the most about, in that people wanted more options within their neighborhood, that they could walk to something like a small restaurant or a coffee shop or something like a Hyde Park or Bound Crossing. And so what we've done is converted our smaller, more walkable, accessible neighborhoods into an MX1 mixed use zone. And so this is where we anticipate to see small scale neighborhood appropriate uses and commercial activity. It's pretty hard to see in this map, but it's the light pink throughout the city. Also, to create more variety of options for people in the neighborhoods that they live, we've allowed for neighborhood cafes in all the MX zones, in addition to the R3, R2, R1C on corner lots. There are many standards and requirements that go along with this, as far as the amount of area that this could occupy, requirements to serve food if alcoholic beverages are being provided, the amount of seating that's appropriate, hours that they can operate, how much parking is required. But this is something in the code that truly has the potential to provide something to people right where they live, that doesn't require them to get in a car or seek out those destinations that are often referred to as something that people want to see more, like Hyde Park or wherever you might go for coffee or the Still or something like that. So we're excited to see neighborhood cafes in this new code. I spoke a little bit about the incentives in the code, and this was our effort really to be intentional about where we were going to diversify the housing options within residential districts, but in doing so, ensure that we would see the affordability and sustainability requirements come through in a way that really met the city's goals for becoming climate neutral and for increasing housing. So along the lines of sustainability, for affordability, in the R1 for both the stimulated affordability, you can get up to 4 units for any R1 lot and affordable. Sorry, that's reading wrong for me, but affordable and sustainable housing R1 up to 4 units by right. If you take advantage of the incentives, there's requirements about what percentage of affordable housing that needs to be offered at, in addition to what are the sustainability requirements as far as zero energy, all electric, and requirements around irrigation. Strategic infill applies to certain kind of lots throughout the city and would allow up to 12 units in R1B and R1C, and as well as some ability to adaptively reuse residential developments that would allow a reduction in the parking and increased density. Our conversion map, so on the effective date, all zones in the city will map over to the new code. There are a few variations, like we retain the R1A. In order to come back through and develop the R1A, it would be a complete rezone. Any pending annexations or rezones that are currently in the queue at planning and zoning or city council will be converted based on this conversion table. And a little bit of a transition to then talking about how we expect this to come before planning and zoning and city council. So in the code, in our section that refers to process, we broke down the types of applications and how we will process them based on 4 different varieties. So type 1 would be our most simple review. These would be temporary signage, occupancy, home occupancy, excuse me. They're meant to be over the counter or very fast, day of, next day. They're what we consider type 1. Type 2 are not in themselves small projects, but these are projects that are at a staff level and with state law and our code able to be approved at a staff level. Some of them still would have significant design requirements in addition to, you'll see a little bit later, collaboration with other city departments and outside agencies. But for the sake of walking through kind of the difference between type 2 and type 3, type 2 are at a staff level, that approval. Type 3 is where we move into the appointed approval bodies, whether that's planning and zoning, historic preservation, or design review. And then type 4 are projects that also would most likely be seen by those other commissions, but they would also be required to go into city council based on state land use code. Here's a fuller list of all the kinds of applications that we expect to see under type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. I would note a couple things. So one is how we've treated appeals in the new code. So type 1s are not appealable. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I'll walk back on that. They are appealable to the hearing examiner to be very quickly addressed. Type 2s would be appealed to the hearing examiner, where type 3s and type 4s would go on to the next hearing body. Variances in type 3 called out there, those would only be heard by the hearing examiner, which we are working to bring a hearing examiner in under contract as we go into effect. And a few other things just to note. So we've introduced a new type of application in type 2 that's allowed use and allowed form. So projects that meet the requirements as far as what we've said for what is allowed in certain zones, and then what we want to have as a part of that development in terms of its height and its density. Those are what we call allowed use and allowed form. So those would be an administratively approved staff level project. There's an asterisk under type 2 for this call out to the interdepartmental review. That's something that we created as a part of this code that would bring together those other city departments and other agencies to talk about those kind of projects that, while they may be an administratively approved type of project, they do require a significant amount of collaboration and coordination with other agencies. So there is interdepartmental review sprinkled into type 2, as well as type 3 and type 4. This gets busy really quick, but let me walk you through it, and I think you'll find actually that it's pretty explainable. So a little bit like a chutes and ladder kind of game. But what we have here is our process reflected in a map. And if you're those type 1 applications and type 2A, the real important thing here is just to realize that you're only going to be on the top line. That's our first initial conversation with applicants, as well as their submittal for their plan. And if it's easy, like a small temporary sign approval, or it's a 2A, what we call 2A, which doesn't get into those higher level use specific standards and design requirements, you would have an off ramp there for type 1 and type 2A. Now, if you're the type of project that does require interdepartmental review, or it has the need to go on to hearing and would continue down, you're going to bend the corner there. Projects that go on to hearing will also have a requirement for their neighborhood meeting and requirements about how those meetings will be conducted, what needs to be captured as a part of the feedback, how to submit that feedback and material to us to review. And those projects and the type 2B would go on to then that interdepartmental review. Once interdepartmental review is conducted for type 2Bs, that's the point at which they would off-ramp to the administrative approval, where those that then submit their application and need to go on to either the hearing examiner because it's a variance, or the appropriate commission because of design review, historic, or planning and zoning and city council requirements, would continue on that cadence of our meeting, public meeting hearing schedule. Other updates, so the new code will be in effect on December 1st. That means anything that's submitted until 5 p.m. on November 30th will be under the current code, and as of December 1st will be on the new code. Our ability to actually accept an application on the 1st will coincide with our ability to completely take down our current system, being Acela, and also the website. That's the interface, the public interface with the website. And like any IT software overhaul, system-wide update, because we anticipate that our IT and web development team are going to need not only from 5:01 p.m. in that night, that it will probably take most of the day on the 1st to get all of our systems running, test them, and make sure that they work appropriately. So we expect all of that to truly be up by 8 a.m. on December 4th. The planning department will still be open. You can still call, you can walk in, you can talk to staff about your project, but that functionality of the software and the ability to upload your projects won't be there until Monday morning. Both the old code and the new code will be on the website for several months. We know that there's no clean break in when old code projects will come forward for hearing, or maybe it's a preliminary plat and it needs its final plat. But we do have a sense of when we'll start to see new projects coming before you under the new code, and we'll flag those intentionally to convey that this is something under the old code, and these are the findings and what's the question for the commission to consider, where these are projects under the new code, and this is what's changed with findings and what the question is. Acela, which is that system we use to process our application, is quite a beast of a IT software. I think that what users on the other end will find with the process, if they're familiar with Acela, that they're familiar with how to upload documents, but we have much more guiding context-rich information about where are you in the step of the process? What are the documents that are required? What does a well-prepared package look like? And that goes much so with the planned website improvements that we've already been making. There's a snapshot of our website, a little asterisk there. This is not the final version. One thing that's pretty exciting about this, not only does it explain our code and user-friendly ways about what is zoning and the allowed uses or allowed form, but also there's a project center page where you can find everything about, our what are the sidewalks requirements in my neighborhood? What are the tree requirements? Can I have pet roosters or real roosters or whatever? You can't have roosters. Urban farming. Those questions that we get constantly from the community wanting to just understand what their options are. We've tried to make it really user-friendly that you can go to the website and in that project center page, you can find a lot of the information that breaks down the code in really simple ways so you don't have to comb through the document yourself. A tool that we had in development mode throughout our outreach, but we've incorporated into the city's website, and so embedded it and added some more design features and more useful information. Is something we have called the Development Tracker. So this will be a tool where anyone can sign up for updates about what applications have been submitted in your neighborhood, or you could go to it and search by different neighborhoods. It would include not only what the project is and lead to Acela, which will give you all the project detail and all the documents that have been provided, but also tell you where it is in its approval process and what's next. If it does require a public meeting, this is also where someone could find the contact information for the developer and have the ability to either go to a site map or a website to find out more about the project, or direct contact information to the developer or whoever they deem as their contact. So we do anticipate a bit of a transition for when new projects will be at the various commissions and at our different steps within the process. So when the new code goes into effect on the 1st, all entitlements under the old code will stay true. So those projects still will continue on over the course of their time. Once you're entitled, you have a 2-year entitlement window before you need to submit your plans for permits within the building department. And so that's at least a time horizon that we'll be tracking to 2 years out, which projects are still out there under their previous entitlement. By February, we'll anticipate that we have already had a few projects go through concept review. Those type 1s and type 2As will be moving through their administrative approval, where 2Bs that require interdepartmental review, that'll be the beginning of January. We'll have our first IDR on January 6th. And once you pass through IDR and you've had your appropriate neighborhood meetings, that's where we get the sense that the first likely projects, if they were to submit in early December, they'll be to planning and zoning by the early March. So the March 6th meeting would be the first one, or the 13th. What we would ideally like to do is separate old code versus new code. So maybe on the 6th, you're just hearing new code, or on the 13th, then you turn your attention to some old code items. Hopefully not kind of meshing them too much, but we'll understand the volume of what we have. We have a pretty small backlog right now, what we call our projects not yet scheduled for hearing. And because you have the ability to submit between now and November 30th, we know that there are some outstanding projects, less than 50, that could still come through the door, but it's a pretty manageable amount, considering from other jurisdictions that we've heard from, that when they do switch to a new code in this way, because people are so familiar and comfortable with the previous code, there's a rush to get in at the end. And we're not anticipating that at all. We haven't really seen that. In fact, we hear more so that people are looking to the effective date of the new code to come forward with their projects, because they see something either in the zoning or the design requirements or the process that speaks to them. So we will be busy in December and January, starting to get projects through the pipeline, and even moving through that regular process. We'll get going in March with presentations then to planning and zoning about any projects under the new code that are a type 3 or type 4. We'll also visually convey kind of what is a different project, so you'll know when you're, especially as you're hearing about older code projects, like what clearly is under the new code, or old code and new code. We do have some outreach coming up, just getting out to the community and telling them about our transition timeline and some of the tools that we've created. So we'll be at the 15th at Bound Crossing, the 21st at Collister Library, and on the 29th at Hillcrest. And then reaching out to and speaking at work sessions for planning and zoning. Tomorrow we're at City Council for those minor typos and edits that we were before planning and zoning just a month ago to discuss, but also giving an update about implementation, and then historic preservation and design review a little bit later. So with that, I'll stand for any questions. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate the update. Any questions, gang?
Mr. Chairman.
Milt, please.
Jessica, do you have any sense for when things settle out sometime May or June and we're basically all switched over, what the volume of planning and zoning is going to be relative to where it is now in terms of all these applications?
You know, good question, Commissioner Gillespie, or Chairman Schaefer, Commissioner Gillespie. We don't, it's a little bit of a kind of guessing game at this point of the volume of applications. I mean, the economy is one thing to consider. We just know in general, we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown, especially on the building permit side of what's coming through. So who wants to come in
Right.
and get entitled within the next 6 months? And then when it comes in, how aware are applicants of their ability to fit into that type 2 allowed use, allowed form box, or there's something that isn't quite working. And so it might be a height exception or a setback or something that pushes them into that type 3 because they're varying. They're an allowed use perhaps, but they're an alternative form. And so that would be something that would come to planning and zoning, as well as all the traditional projects that you would see under planning and zoning. So we don't have a number about what we would know in May or June, but what we do have going forward with the new code is an operations dashboard that gives us a really dynamic and live time look at what applications are in and where they are in the process, and creating estimated turnaround times on those, and also tracking to the amount of time that projects are with us versus the time they're back out with an applicant or back out with another agency. So that will give us a really clear picture at what we're looking at, and understand too, from a capacity standpoint, is there something that we need to fine tune from a process improvement that we know our front end is taking longer on the process. And so we need to deploy different resources, staff or tools there, or it's hearings that are something that we're seeing a lot of projects moving to hearings. And so do we have to speed up how many are at a hearing each night? There's only so many that you can all hear each night, and how many times you can meet in the month.
Mr. Chairman.
Right, please, yeah.
So why don't we just go through a couple examples? Because as I understand it, the number of items that are coming to this commission is lower. So it's hard to imagine that the number of items will go up, and it might go down, right?
I would
So
say that's
the
probably
intention.
I
fair.
want to just
Yeah.
look at tonight's agenda. So can we, and you guys put on all you smart people brain. So item A is a PUD, a CFH which is a hillside, a variance, all in one smush. So that would still come to us because it has a hillside, or would just the hillside come to us? And if the PUD is allowed form, allowed use, the PUD gets stripped out and handled, or does it still all get balled together? Or does the hearing examiner do the
Get
PUD
one and we get-
and we just do the CFH?
No, so PUDs under the new code are actually technically a rezone, so it'll come to you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So the next PUD is a rezone, so it comes to us.
Mm.
But the CVA associated with it could go to a hearing examiner.
No, so actually, basically the highest type
So
is
it's-
the type.
So it's
Couple it.
the
Yep.
worst case is
Okay.
always the case. Okay.
Okay.
Then the next PUD would come to us. Now, and then item 2 tonight is just a straight variance, I think, CFA. So that
would go
goes to
hearing
the
examiner.
the poor hearing examiner. Right. And then the third one is a straight subdivision. Does that come to us or go straight to council?
That'll still go to you.
So we have to still do these damn subdivisions. Why do we have to do them, by the way?
Well, so we actually
it's not in
changed
LUPA, you could give
to
it right
what
to the
can be a
council.
subdivision.
So here's
Let me
what
get this-
what bugs
it's
me
less than
about
5
subdivisions.
acres.
I call this Bradbury's rule after a long departed commissioner. He's like, subdivisions are automatic under LUPA. There's no approval criteria in the code for subdivisions. Because basically, if they meet the 4 corners of the law, his understanding was that the way LUPA is written, a subdivision's automatic. So that's why there aren't any approval criteria in the old code. So why do you keep making us hear them if they just get rubber stamped and passed up to council?
Now, I would at least answer that in the variety of options that we have for what
You
is.
can
required.
also bug this guy back here.
Well, I think our intention was to make sure that not only everything that is required by LUPA to go forward to an appropriate hearing body, we did introduce as part of the type 3 process, more than was required by LUPA, but that was in an effort to make sure that those projects that significantly impacted a neighborhood had the opportunity to go to public hearings so that you could hear from the neighbors.
Okay.
As staff, whether or not it goes to hearing or not, we do get feedback and hear. But it's more the effect that has on the character of the
The
neighborhood.
process. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
So
just
it's the process of
understand
it.
there's no approval criteria. Like, so we sit and we hear all these and then we're like, yay.
So, and I mean, it does bring up a great point, Commissioner Gillespie, just as far as when we get into implementation and what really is working well and what are we seeing going to hearing and timelines to get approval of. There's an expectation that no less than 12 months, we come back around with recommendations to change the code. We already know a couple of tiny things that we're seeing
Yeah,
as,
yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
not until we get into actual projects and have something live that we can weigh in on that I think we'll really truly understand what in code might be a recommendation to change, and maybe it's the type of applications that go to hearing.
And I guess the last issue on this is because it's a pet point under the Bradbury rule is like somehow a lot of the public expects that we can say, no, we're not doing that subdivision. But in reality, that's very, very difficult to do.
Mhm.
And we've seen the council do it a few times, like out by Micron on that big subdivision that was proposed way out on that
Mhm.
empty plain. And they denied it, but they had to make a pretty complicated safety argument and da 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 da. And so they're always kind of problematic from this seat when we hear those. And
Mhm.
Mhm.
Jessica, do you think that the
Esther wants to talk.
Oh, sorry, Esther. Just real quick on the year kind of review. So you anticipate that happening like February of 25? Like, is that
It's
Is it-
12 months from the date of the effective date. So
So we're-
before December 1st of next year,
okay?
we'll be
okay.
back.
We
through.
feel like there would be enough applications through by that time, and we'll have a pretty good understanding of how it's working.
Yeah, and in addition to the tools that I spoke of, the development tracker, the operations dashboard, we also have a dashboard that speaks to how the new projects coming in under the code align with the city's goals.
Okay.
So are we getting a more robust tree canopy? What does that look like as far as encouraging walkability? Are projects that are along State Street truly realizing that MX3, MX4 that we desire? So that will be something that'll take time to see these projects get built. Because just because they're entitled, we're probably not going to see anything built under the new code until,
Yeah, a year plus.
many
yeah.
months after they get entitled.
Right.
But we'll know what's in the queue and what's coming. And
Great. Esther, please.
Chair Schaefer and Chair Gillespie, I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
He's
You're
just
right.
milk.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'm terrible at this. I apologize.
You're good.
So my question is, even though under LUPA, there's no subdivision approval criteria historically, and this really is towards a question for Mr. Gillespie, Commissioner Gillespie. Have we and planning department too, have we seen proposals where we have actually added conditions to the subdivision? Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's a good reason why we hear them. I've always wondered what would happen if an applicant just said, go pound sand, we want to build it the way we submitted it. And James can talk about that, but the city the council has successfully denied, I think, a couple of subdivisions. I'd have to stretch hard to think, but we definitely put a lot of requirements on that one way out by Micron, way like out in the corner, like that's really, there's a lot of policy issues with that subdivision, and they did put on these conditions to gate the growth of the subdivision based on road access, which I think, as I recall, but I'll let the city can talk about that too.
I think that Chair Schaefer and Commissioner Sehat, that's absolutely true. There are the abilities there to add additional conditions in the new code. We also have a higher level of requirements about what's expected within a subdivision as far as the sidewalk standards, street buffers, trees. So I think that it affords a lot to not only have that higher level staff review, but to follow that through in the hearing level to hear from the community about the effect in that neighborhood at this point, but we can evaluate as well.
Okay. I think we need to move on to our agenda.
Okay.
I know Jesse, I think Jesse's going to move us along. Is Jesse moving us along?
Mr. Chair, that was my plan.
Okay, very good. Jessica, thank you for the update. Much
you.
appreciated.
So I'm going to run us through agenda review. Tonight I am standing in for Crystal to learn how to do this.
Okay.
So the first two items we have are on the consent agenda. It'd be item A, PUD 20-40, CFH 20, or sorry, PUD 21-40, CFH 21-121, and CVA 21-44 by Rodney Evans and Partners at 1702 North Sixth Street. This is a time extension for a conditional use permit for planned residential development comprised of 8 attached townhomes on 1.06 acres in the R1C zone. This also has a category 3 hillside development permit for grading associated with a residential subdivision, as well as a variance to encroach into the street side setback, and a preliminary plat for a subdivision comprised of 1 common and 8 buildable lots. Item B is also a time extension that is PUD 20-30, 21-30, CBA 21-38. And this is a time extension at 3683 North Harbor Lane for a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 18 condo units on 0.44 acres in an LOD zone. There's also a height exception, variances to encroach into the rear and side setback, and a condo plat with 1 common and 8 condominium lots. The first item that we have to hear is item 1, PUD 23-26 by the Land Group at 611 West Parkside View Lane. This is a modification to a conditional use permit to reduce the total amount of single-family units from 13 to 11 in an existing residential plan development on 4.98 acres in an R1B zone. We are recommending denial, and there is not anyone expected to speak on this from the public tonight.
Okay. And then Jesse, just as a reminder, I've got to recuse on that item, of course. So I believe Mr. Gillespie will be running the show. Excellent.
All right, great. The last 2 items we can try for consent. Number 2 is CVA 23-18 on 1216 North Harrison Boulevard, which is a variance to encroach into the rear setback for a detached accessory building on 0.14 acres in an R1CH zone. And finally, item number 3 is also eligible for consent. It is SUV 23-25, O'Brady subdivision at 3915 West Camas Street. And it is a preliminary and final plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 5 buildable lots on approximately 1.2 acres in an R1C zone. We just have a couple minutes if anybody needs to take a quick break, and then we can resume at 6.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Well done.
Gonna get started as it's 6 o'clock. There's a few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing virtually has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you will be called upon and unmuted. There's a chat function in Zoom. This is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team, then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who are in person and then those who signed up on the sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony, and we are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jesse. Good evening. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. That's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report, and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago, with staff, applicant, and neighbor association presentations, and then public testimony. Thank you all for attending tonight. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Here?
Squires, Blanchard,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
Gillespie,
Here.
Finfrock,
Here.
Stanley, Mooney, Seha,
Here.
6 present, 3 absent.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a few items to consider for the consent agenda. So we'll start there this evening. Without objection, I'll place item A on the consent agenda. This is a time extension. The applications are PUD 21-40, CFH 21-121, and CVA 21-44, Rodney Evans and Partners LLC. Project address is 1702 North 6th Street. This is a time extension for a conditional use permit for a planned residential subdivision development comprised of 8 attached townhomes on 1.06 acres in R1C zone. There's also a category 3 hillside permit application and a variance to encroach into the side setback. And then also the preliminary plat and residential subdivision comprised of 1 common lot and 8 buildable lots. So again, that's just a straight time extension that we will place on consent. Also, item B, without objection, I will also place on consent. Also time extension, PUD 21-30 and CVA 21-38, Hura Architecture at 3683 North Harbor Lane. This is a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 18 condominium units on 0.44 acres in an LOD zone. Also included is a height exception and variances to encroach into the rear and side setbacks. The residential condominium plat is comprised of 1 common lot and 18 condominium lots. Again, that's also a straight time extension that we'll place on the consent agenda. Move ahead to item number 2, which is also eligible for the consent agenda. This is CVA 23-18. The applicant is Julie Varon. The address is 1216 North Harrison Boulevard. This is a variance to encroach the rear setback for a detached accessory building on 0.14 acres in an R1CH zone. And is the applicant present? Great. And Mr. Varon, are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Great. Let the record show our applicant is present and in agreement with the staff report. Is there anyone in attendance tonight hoping to testify in opposition to this item? Very good. There is no one online, it looks like. So with that, we'll go ahead and place item 2 on the consent agenda. And also eligible for consent is item number 3. This is SUB 23-25 O'Brady subdivision at 3915 West Camas Street. This is a preliminary and final plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 5 buildable lots on approximately 1.2 acres in an R1C zone. And is the applicant present? Great. And are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Terrific. The records show applicant is present and in agreement with the staff report. Anyone hoping to testify in opposition to this item? Very good. We'll go ahead and place item 3 on the consent agenda. And with that, I will entertain a motion regarding consent.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock,
I move to approve items A, B, 2, and 3 on the consent agenda, along with the recommended and standard conditions of approval.
Second.
great, thank you. I have a motion to approve consent by Commissioner Finfrock with a second by Commissioner Moore. Any further discussion on the matter? Very good. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Gillespie,
Yes.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Seha,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys. Good luck with the projects. Okay, we'll return back to the top of our agenda. Item number 1, PUD 23-26, the Land Group Inc. at 611 West Parkside View Lane. This is a modification to a conditional use permit to reduce the total amount of single-family units from 13 to 11 in an existing residential plan development on 4.98 acres in R1B zone. With this item, I'm going to recuse myself as I'm a partner at the Land Group and the landscape architect of record on this project. So I will be handing off this project to Mr. Gillespie to run this item.
Mr. Moser?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for a planned residential development modification to reduce the density to 11 dwelling units. This density reduction would be achieved by converting all the homes on the development to detached single-family houses. The total subject property size is 4.9 acres and is located at 611 West Parkside View Lane in an R1B zone. The property is located along the east side of Bogus Basin Road, approximately 1 mile north of Hill Road, and is surrounded by a variety of uses, including an elementary school to the west, detached single-family homes to the north, a golf course to the east, and small commercial property to the south. The general background of the project is that in 2019, a planned unit development and a Category 3 hillside and a subdivision was approved, and it consisted of 17 dwelling units containing a mix of building types comprised of detached single-family houses and townhouses. To support the project design, reduced setbacks and lot sizes were approved with the original PUD. In 2021, the applicant requested a density reduction to convert 8 townhomes into 4 detached single-family houses. This PUD modification was approved administratively, and the project design still maintained several townhouses along the west side of the development. This slide here shows the modifications as proposed. On one side, it does show the original project design, so it did have townhouses along Bogus and along Curling. And then in 2021, the lots marked in red were converted to detached single-family houses. And now the request is to come in and remove the remaining 2 or 4 townhome lots marked in green to detach single-family and convert. The planning team recommends denial of the PUD modification since it does not comply with all the required findings. In particular, the site is not large enough to accommodate the proposed use without the waivers, which being the reduced setbacks and lot sizes permitted through the original PUD approval. These waivers were granted in order to promote an innovative project design that included 2 different building types, townhomes and detached single-family houses, and a straight detached single-family neighborhood straight detached single-family neighborhood is not an innovative project design. The proposed modification fundamentally changes the design of the project by removing the townhouses. A higher density project, such as the original design, are encouraged at intersections along minor arterial roadways, which would be Bogus Basin, and minor collector roadways, which Curling Street or Road. And also such property is adjacent to a public school. Therefore further reducing the density of this project does not comply with the intent of the PUD ordinance. Also, the modification for a density reduction and the removal of the townhouse units from the project is not supported by the comprehensive plan. There are several policies in the comprehensive plan that promote providing a mix of housing types within planned unit developments. In conclusion, since the project does not comply with all the required findings, the planning team recommends denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Ms. Thompson? Give that thing a shout, see if it's working. It's working.
Mr. Chair, there we
There we
go. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name's Tamara Thompson. I'm with the Land Group. We're officed at 462 East Shore Drive in Eagle. And I'm pleased to be here tonight. I have a PowerPoint that I will show you as well. And I'd like to start with just a little bit of history since this is a modification to a prior approval of a PUD. So originally, this is an infill site at the northeast corner of Bogus Basin and Curling Drive. The property was previously a church, as you can see on this aerial. And when the land group got involved and when our client purchased the property, the church had moved to a different site and had the property for sale because of the topography. It was increasingly difficult and it did not meet ADA standards. The building had stairs in it and stuff like that. So they moved to a different site and sold the property. It's under 4 acres. I'm sorry, under 5 acres with different you'll see different sizes. So at one time it was 4.98, but that went to the center line of the road. And then if you take out the right of way, it's under 4.8. Let's see, this is what it, let me back up. Nope, that's it. So this is what it looks like today. There's 2 single-family homes that are constructed today. The subdivision has been constructed. There's the one point of access is off of Bogus Basin Road, and it utilizes private roads that come into the site with a cul-de-sac at the top. With the previous approval, the steep slope constituted a hardship, which justified retaining walls and reduced setbacks. Oh, sorry, this doesn't seem to work exactly when I push it. Am I doing it right? Where do I point? This, oh. Okay, so this I wanted to show you a little bit closer, that through the city council process, our original application did not include sidewalks on both sides of the road. In fact, we didn't include sidewalks at all because of the small nature. And city council included sidewalks on both sides of the road. And I bring that up just to point out that it increased our right-of-way, our road width by 30%, which reduced the size of our lots and reduced the depths of those by at least 6.5 feet on their frontage. And I'll explain why that's important in a second. Let's see, this is back where there's 2 homes currently constructed. There's 2 more homes that are currently under construction, and those are the lots up on the hillside, which are estate lots. Those lots, 2 of which are over 1/2 an acre each, and the others are closer to 1/3 of an acre. And then we have these that are currently constructed that you see here. Those are more like patio homes where they don't have big yards and they're smaller in size. So we do still have 2 product types.
Can you guys switch your slides for her, please?
There we go.
Thank you.
So this is what it previously looked like. And what I want to point out is the lack of sidewalks and the road on Bogus Basin, and then the church that was up there. And then this is existing conditions. This is what it looks like today. So with the development, it facilitated ACHD being able, they had a project already, but they needed right of way off of this site. So this site facilitated that right of way and created a bike lane, as you see, a 6 lanes or a 6-foot sidewalk, curb and gutter, and then that's our main entrance here. And then due to market demand, the PUD modification to combine 8 of the townhouse lots to 4 detached lots was approved in 2001. And those are the ones that are in blue there. With that reduced density, the project, oh, and what I want to do is from that staff report from 2001 is read to you verbatim what that approval was, because it was approved in 2001. And that has, quote, "The changes will not significantly alter the nature of the development. With a reduced density, the project is similar to the surrounding neighborhood, and it will not change the residential nature of the project. As such, the proposed modification is compatible and will not adversely impact the surrounding area. The site is large enough to accommodate the development and will not place an undue burden on transportation and other public facilities. Reducing the density complements the scale and character of the surrounding residential neighborhoods. Principal IDP-N.1 encourages infill and redevelopment within established neighborhoods to be compatible with the height, scale, and massing as the adjacent homes. The density reduction allows for construction of detached single-family housing, which matches the housing types within the adjacent residential neighborhoods." So this is from a staff report dated November 16th, 2021. Code is still the same today as it was in 2021. And so it was a complete shock to us when we received a staff report recommending denial. As you can see, the public received many benefits from this design. One of the others that I want to point out is I've highlighted the sidewalks in yellow. And we have a continuing from the neighborhood to the north of us, which is called Hackberry. And then, as you know, there's a elementary school on the south side of Curling. And these aren't exactly the same because north and south, I mean, it's kind of angled, but I think you have the gist of it if we call Bogus Basin north. But we have connection points through the neighborhood from Hackberry. So you'll see we have a continuing sidewalk or pathway that comes down through. Students can come through the site, so they don't have to go out onto Bogus Basin from Hackberry. They can get down through the subdivision to their school. And then we also have a cart path that takes you to the Crane Creek Country Club as well. Additionally, we do have 2 product types. Even though they're not attached units, the residential units down that front on the streets, those are smaller units. And I have some, I can get it, there we go. These are the 2 houses that are currently constructed. So these are more in the patio home size where they don't have big yards. They're more, with nice patios in the rear. And then the custom homes, these are the 2 that are permitted currently. So these are over 4,200 square feet each and multiple stories. They are customized to fit into the topography of the neighborhood or with the topography. That side of the custom homes goes up considerably. So the patio homes, that it has all been leveled out and it is ready to construct. So you don't have to get a hillside permit. These on the custom side, because of the topography, they have to come back through the city to go through this the hillside development, and they're customized to fit into the topography, as you can see here. And they're much larger. They're closer to a half an acre in size. And here's some more concepts of what the custom homes look like. So I just want to go through quickly that the purpose of the planned unit development, it was not ever a condition to provide 2 product types, although we do have 2 product types. And then the variety of housing types, it says it may be used, but it's encouraged, but it's not required. And the decision for the Planning and Zoning Commission is based on the following criteria. And the location is compatible with the general neighborhood, so that is a yes. The project use will not place undue burden on transportation and other public facilities. That is a correct statement.
Time.
I thought I had 15 minutes.
Normally 10, so
Okay,
can you go ahead and move to summation?
yes,
Thank
I
you.
will go real quickly.
It's okay. Just go at your pace.
So in looking at these, the decisions, before you tonight is it going from 13 down to 11 units? And it's frustrating that 2 years ago, it was fine, and today it's not when we're talking about 2 units. And the different criteria that's been used for those. The public has received many benefits on the design, such as Bogus Basin Road and pedestrian pathways through the site that facilitate the elementary students getting to the site. So it's been a quid pro quo. My client has had to pivot due to market demand. This was not something that was a bait and switch. The townhouse lots have not been well received. They've been marketing these since 2019. It affected the estate lots. Those weren't moving, and the reasons that people were saying is because of the townhouse lots. And then the smaller you make a lot, the harder it is to get the grading and everything to work out. So these detached product is in high demand, and my client has buyers lined up and ready to go. We respectfully request your approval to reduce 4 townhouse lots to 2 detached residential lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Stand for
Thompson. Stick
questions.
around. We're going to hear first if they're here or online from the Highlands Neighborhood Association. Is there anyone here from, hey, you're not from Highlands, way in the back? No, okay. All right, good. We'll open it up for questions from the commission to our esteemed guest and Mr. Moser.
Commissioner, do I call you Mr. Chair, or Commissioner?
You could call
Oswald?
me just Milt.
Okay. Commissioner Milt. Question.
Commissioner Moore.
I have a question. I think first I have a couple of questions. So first for staff, and then I have a question for the applicant. So for staff, the main kind of argument in our packet was that the lot sizes aren't big enough, or there's not enough space in the development for this proposed modification. But we're going from kind of townhouses on 2 lots to a single family unit on 1 lot. Is that comment about, not enough space or the setbacks being too small? Is that mostly to do with the existing houses, or does that have to do with something in the proposed detached single family?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Moore, the point I was trying to get with that is that the original PUD was granted reduced interior setbacks from the project and reduced lot sizes in order to accommodate the mix of uses on the site, which would include the townhouses. So we were willing to grant that waiver from that original PUD at the time to accommodate this, the project that was being presented. With the conversion over to just a straight detached single family house for the entire development, they probably, if that came through at the time, I couldn't speak, but I don't know if, those type of waivers would have been granted. It would just been at that. Maybe they would have, because it's still a hillside, but at this point, my perspective on that is that it's, with a straight detached single family house on lots that comply with the R1B zone, they need to have met the setbacks as per the zone. And we granted the waivers in the anticipation that they were going to be townhouses. And if that answers your question.
So Mr. Commissioner.
Ms. Moore.
So
More.
it sounds like the main issue is, so either the single family detached need to get smaller, or the existing houses that have been built to those waivers need to either, their lots need to get bigger or they need to change or get a waiver themselves. Is that kind of the gist?
Mr. Commission, or Mr. Chair, Commissioner Moore, I'd say yes. I mean, in the degree that it's, if you're going to put detached single-family houses on a lot that generally complies with the R1B zone, it should probably meet the R1B setbacks.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have some more questions.
Oh,
if
you have
don't mind.
more?
Yeah.
Okay, keep
Okay,
going.
Commissioner. So this is for the applicant. I was a
Ms.
little,
Thompson.
little
this
bit
for you.
confused. Yeah. I was a little bit confused about the two different product types. I know one is smaller than the other, but they both kind of seem like they each had 3-car garages, a couple thousand square feet. So could you kind of go into a little bit more detail about how they do differ?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Moore, the two different product types are for two different types of buyers. So like a half-acre lot with slopes is a custom build. So that is a different buyer. It backs up to the golf course and it has views where and those have been, the two that are built are over 4,000 square feet each. So they're much bigger, grander homes built into the topography that are customized, where the others, they are single family, but they're much smaller. And they are, they're considered more of a patio home where just a completely different price point and type of and density too.
So I have a question for the applicant. Other than financial or market-driven issues, are there any technical or geographic or any other issues why you want to make this change?
Mr. Chair, the conditions that were put on the original PUD, I believe had unintended consequences. Making the roadway an extra 30% bigger with the sidewalks on both sides ate into those lots, and it makes it really difficult to do the townhouses with the depths that are left there. Getting rid of that middle property line and being able to spread it a little wider with a single home makes it much easier to develop. But it is market driven also.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? Going once, twice. Okay, that's it for questions. So we'll now move to public testimony. Is there anybody here tonight who'd like to testify on this issue? This is issue 1, PUD 23-26. Okay, nobody's here. Is there anybody online who'd like to testify in this issue? Nobody's there. Okay, so I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. Ms. Thompson, you have up to 5 minutes for rebuttal. And since I may have cut you a little bit short on your opening statement, you're free to use your 5 minutes now, but there's not a lot to rebut.
David, can I get that PowerPoint back, please? Mr. Chair, Tamara Thompson again. I don't have a lot to rebut. I think the main thing I'd like to go back to is just the criteria for making your decision and the project is in compliance with the subdivision, with the hillside development regulations. It's been signed off on and it's sat there with these lots ready to go for more than a couple of years, and they're just not being well received. So in order to get things moving and to get some homes up, that we have a housing crisis, and although it is a few less homes, 11 rather than 13, 2 less, we do have a market for it and we have demand for it. So we're asking for your approval to allow us to move forward with this. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. And with that, the matter is before the commission. Again, this is a PUD. So we're making the decision tonight and then it's appealable to council. That's correct. Right. So there you go.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
I move that we deny PUD 23-26 for the reasons stated in the staff report.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
So I have a motion to deny PUD 23-26 from Commissioner Finfrock with a second from Commissioner Seha. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Finfrock.
Yeah, so as David pointed out, I think the waiver, the initial waiver was, we pretty much allowed it so that we could accommodate the mixed use, the townhomes plus the single family homes. And I think what they are coming back with now is they still want that waiver, but they want these, they want the individual homes and I think we're getting rid of that mixed use. And so I think that, like Commissioner Moore pointed out, there's an absence in product type. And I think, even with this revised code, we've talked about increased density in these types of housing projects that are important to the city. And I think this is probably we're going to see a lot of this where maybe developers are going to tell us that there's no market demand, but we know through public testimony, and we sat through like 5 days of it, that there is demand out there for townhomes and different types of housing. And so I think the need for townhomes aligns with the current code and the comprehensive plan for that increased density. And I think this location is appropriate for it as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Finfrock. Any other comments? I'll chip in. Wait, Commissioner Moore.
Since I had asked a lot of questions, totally agree with Commissioner Finfrock's summation. I think, she hit the nail on the head. Requesting a reduction in density and a revision while still maintaining those reduced setbacks. I think that's really the core of the issue as I understand it. And I think that's the big thing for me. So I'll be in support of the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I'll just chip in. I'll be supporting the motion. However, I will say that I am sensitive to the applicant's argument about market demand. And if in a year or two we're back in the same boat, I would understand that and think it would be appropriate for us to revisit it at that time. But I will be supporting the motion now for the reasons stated. Okay. With that, if there's no more comments, we'll get ready to vote. Will the clerk? So this is a motion to deny PUD 23-26. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Yes.
Finfrock,
Yes.
Seha,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay. And with that, I think our business tonight is concluded. Staff, do you guys have anything else? Thank you as always. And with that, we're adjourned.